Hey, this is Byron, and I have Derrick LaMere with me. Welcome to the show, Derrick.
Thanks, Byron. It's nice to be here.
So, can you please briefly introduce yourself for our listeners who may not be familiar with you?
Yeah, my name's Derrick LaMere. I'm a documentary filmmaker. I now live in Spokane, Washington, and I'm the director of United by Water, which is showing here at the Interpretive Center. And it's about the tribes of the Upper Columbia returning to Kettle Falls by traditional means, the dugout canoes we built. On a personal level, I'm a Colville tribal descendant, the lake span Snakes, and I am a Rocky Boy tribal member from Montana area. Right now, I reside in Spokane, Washington with my wife. I was raised in Portland, Oregon, but I would spend all my waking moments that wasn't in school out here in like Nispelum, Grand Coulee area with my grandma, with my brother. And so I got a lot of history out this way.
Well, that's great. So I guess the story of this film starts about 75 years ago, huh?
For story's sake, I would say about 10,000 years ago. So for a very long time, the tribes in the Upper Columbia would do different ceremonies. This ceremony in particular was called the Salmon Ceremony, and we would welcome the salmon home. We would trade, feast, camp with other tribes and other people of the area, traders and all that from Canada and above. And in 1940, when the Grand Coulee Dam was completed, we had our last salmon ceremony, and that was called the Ceremony of Tears. And it was really the last time we got to see Kettle Falls, which is where the salmon ceremony would happen and where we fished for thousands and thousands of years. This documentary is about our return. So we were kind of, I guess, going back the same way we had come before, through traditional means from our homelands. Each tribe had their own hand dug out canoe, and 6 communities: the Inshalim, Nispelum, Kalispel, Kootenai, Spokane, and Coeur. We all went from our own tribal homelands, which are in a roundabout way connected at the Columbia. So the Spokanes came from the Spokane River. We came from the shadow of the Grand Coulee Dam at Spring Canyon, and we paddled up, and we all moved towards Kettle Falls, kind of symbolically showing that we're returning back to the water, and we're getting back into our tradition that's been lost since it was flooded at Kettle Falls.
All right, yeah. So when the Grand Coulee Dam was completed, when was it? When? So you said 1940 was when the water started backing up?
Yeah, so the construction started in 1933, and throughout it started becoming more and more backed up, and it finally reached about 115 miles away. I know that because I paddled from Spring Canyon all the way up there. So 115 miles away, that's when they really started seeing the gravity of what they were losing. So these tribes, specifically the Colville Confederated tribes, we saw that our homelands were being flooded. In Shalim, where my family is from, or where my grandfather is from, Old Inshalim is actually flooded and underwater. They were able to move the schools and the city for the most part, but we lost a lot of burial grounds, ceremonial sites. So, we still feel that impact today. At the time, it was kind of told to us that we were, this was happening. We could either be with it or against it, and we were sold that this was good for the tribe, good for America, which it was, but I don't know if they really understood the impact at the time.
Right. How far, even back up the river, how high that water was going to rise, for example.
Right. In the trailer of United by Water, it is a poem read by Sherman Alexie, and it's about the loss of the salmon. But in this trailer, we use footage from Wallace Gamble. He, at the time, would document a lot of these processes, take a lot of pictures. Well, we had got this footage from the MAC, the Museum of Art and Culture, I believe is what it's called in Spokane. And we got this footage that had, from what I can tell from my research, has never been seen. And it's a different look. It shows this bridge that now crosses Kettle Falls. It shows the forms being broken down, but it also shows, with this trailer I cut in, our crossing of that bridge, and you still see that bridge and you see where that water line is. So you kind of have, if you pay attention to the trailer, you see the impact of that history and how far that waters came up. So it's a really interesting look. But yeah, I try to tell that story to show people just visually, like what we've lost, just even agriculturally, or just our surroundings, how different they are. The river we look at today is not the same river our grandmothers, great grandmothers, grandfathers have seen over time. So
right, yeah. Well, can you tell me a little bit about the film here? How did it come to be? How did it start out?
So in 2015, Upper Columbia United Tribes, they are a Native nonprofit outside of Spokane, Washington. They take the interests of the tribes and they apply it to culturally political things. They acquired 6 old-growth cedar logs from the Quinault Indian Nation, or at least the territory of that. And they really wanted people to use this to be recreational, but also symbolically show we were coming back to the water. So they dropped these big logs, 30,000-pound logs, 40-foot long, at the time before they're carved down. And they dropped them off in these communities, and they're like, here, this is what we're doing on July 16th, I believe is the date. And, you got until then to get it done. So John Zinzer, he's a canoe maker. He's actually from New York City, but he spent so much time out here building canoes, educating himself on the rivers and waterways with his friends. He had reached out to me, and he said, hey, I know you're a Colville tribal member or descendant. He's like, I've seen your other film. I had done a previous film called The Seventh Wave in 2013. And that was about the tribes of the west coast of Washington and their journey from Canada down to Seattle. So they call it the canoe journey, but it's ocean bound. So he had seen that documentary, and he was like, this is perfect. You should tell that story. So that's kind of the beginning of it. And it was just me and John. John invited me out, challenged me at a time that, maybe I wasn't thinking so clear. I was going through recovery from a concussion, or a series of concussions I had had, within about a year and a half. Yeah, it was kind of a crazy time, but I needed something like that. Little did I know. I didn't know at the time, like, I needed to go out and do this recreational thing. But it was really cool to connect with John, who's now one of my really good friends, connect back with the tribe who I had not really worked with in a very long time. So it was nice to kind of get back to that, get back to the homeland, meet these people that, I have known all my life, but indirectly, and to really see all of us grow and complete this journey and complete this documentary.
Well, yeah, it sounds like it was a healing adventure there. And, I was particularly moved by your story of experiencing healing within yourself and some of your family members in the process of participating in this adventure. Can you speak to that a little?
Yeah. I spoke a little bit earlier, but at the time I was still recovering from a concussion that had some really nasty effects. I was in speech therapy, dealing with a lot of what I now know as depression, but I was definitely in my own head. And John challenged me. John challenged me to come out, tell the story of, my people, my friends, my family. He was like, nobody's telling this story. He was actively trying to document it through pictures, through social media. And he was like, I don't do that. I build canoes. You make movies. Come out here. And, I told him my issues, and he was like, that's fine, but this will help you out. Sure enough, it definitely, changed my outlook at the time. And I was definitely ready to get it out there and help any way I can.
Did you participate in the canoe carving or the canoe journey at all?
Yeah, so that's kind of how it started. Is I wanted to be a fly on the wall at first, because I didn't know how much I really wanted to commit to telling the story. Like, am I able to tell this story the right way? Am I able to, carry this new story of culture on my shoulders? I had done that with a few different films, and, the weight is pretty tough to carry. But, as I went on, I got more and more inspired working with some of the men and women, but especially the women in particular, really stepping out of their comfort zones and painting, carving, learning things like, some of the cave drawings and paintings that we have are now on the Inshlim canoe. Yeah, so it was really awesome to kind of get into that. Like, I picked up some of these carving tools that seemed really scary at the time, But got to really learn that, and also just learn a lot from the people, like what their motivations were. So yeah, I spent a lot of time carving, and if you look on the Inchalim canoe, my name's not on it, but my handprint is, which is really important to me because that's where my great-grandfather was. I camped out with John there for weeks at a time. So, those are little stories that, are really important to me. So I definitely, put some, outside of the filmmaking work, definitely put in some work on the carving. And then I also paddled with the Nespelem canoe from the Grand Coulee Dam. So over at Spring Canyon, I paddled from there all the way to Kettle Falls, which is 115 linear miles. But anyone that's been on that river knows that it's not a straight shot or an easy thing, and it's upriver. So it was quite the battle, considering I had never really done anything quite like that. And I think there's maybe one or two of us, and some of us weren't there the whole time, that actually had experience on the water. So it was really, I guess, the only word, for a lack of a better term, is adventurous. It was really awesome to see these people step out of their comfort zones, become leaders. They have gone on from this to go to Standing Rock. They took these canoes from, the mouth of Missouri and came all the way down into Standing Rock, breaking through the ice and that kind of stuff. So it was really cool to kind of experience, I guess, the inception of their, reemergence, like their cultural, I guess the lack of a better term is just like their inception of them being back to being, traditional or cultural. So it was really cool to see that, and now see how they've used these canoes, used that spirit in other ways.
Well, I appreciate hearing about that. Particularly, I didn't realize that the canoes were involved in the Standing Rock as well. That's cool. Hey, Derrick, can you speak of your family and tell me a little bit about passing Whitestone and what that meant to you at the time?
So my great-grandmother, Isabel Arceza, her mother, Elizabeth, lived in the camps below Whitestone. Whitestone is this giant rock formation on the Columbia. Not a lot of people can see it because the only other way you can go is through this very small town, dirt roads for miles and miles and miles. There's a winery on the top of it, but I digress. But, at that time, my great-grandmother and her mother lived in the camps across the river and just below Whitestone. And they used to paddle back and forth, so there's a real history of canoe culture there. And at the top of Whitestone, it's a ceremonial site. That's where a lot of, our grandmothers and great-grandmothers were born. And it was a story in our family that we have been told, but we have never really seen it in that light. And at the time, I got to reconnect with a cousin of mine named Travis. We hadn't talked for 7 years. It was a kind of a personal issue we had. And there was just a moment where we got both stuck on this boat, this support boat. And I just thought in my head, I was like, we're either going to talk it out or we're going to fight. And I just chose to talk it out. I asked him to hand me something, and that broke the ice. And that was literally the first words I spoke to him in 7 years. And that just happened to be in the shadow of Whitestone. And we started talking about these stories that we had heard, that our grandmother was born there. My cousin was on the canoe. My other cousin, Ben, who's also a filmmaker, was on the canoe when we were passing that. We kind of had a moment, which was, I guess it was a real genuine moment. And it just so happened to be in the shadow of this, this site where our family was from. So it was really powerful to actually get past our personal issues and experience this together. There's no bad feelings about it. Like, this weight was lifted off our shoulders, and I believe that we worked 10 times harder after that, because we were like, all right, like, this is meant to be. It was meant to be that we were on this canoe together, these support boats together, and see this and record it. And ever since then, he's, we're talking like nothing ever happened. He actually did a interview for us for the film, which was really awesome. We actually journeyed up there and went up to the Whitestone Winery. They were nice enough to let us shoot in this area where, our family's from. So they were really, nice enough to let us, shoot that interview there. But it was a really cool moment for us.
Right. So I'm hearing that whether it was coincidence at the time or whether it actually was meant to be, there was healing involved. Yeah. And I can speak to that myself. When we shared a couple notes. emails and whatnot before getting ready for this interview. But one thing, when you shared that with me, that healing moment, I've had a couple of those in my life, and that I really wanted to meet you. When just from reading that's significant for me.
And especially in our culture, our men are very stubborn and hard-headed, and I guess I get that from just that family. We're unwilling to give this up, and it just happened. I can't even explain it, but I'm happy it did. I don't think anything else would have changed my mind if it wasn't for this. So there's a lot of gifts in this canoe journey. There's a lot of healing for a lot of other people as well. But for me, I have these small stories, like having my hand carved on the side of that inch limb canoe, and then paddling past, and also getting past our issues with the cousin that I grew up with. So it was, there's things like that for me. Maybe it's not necessarily spiritual like some other people had, but it was definitely personal, and it was a good moment. I still am a loss for words for some of the experiences I've had.
Oh, I'll bet. Yeah. Well, have you made other documentaries, Derrick?
Yeah. So I went to school in Portland, Oregon at Mount Hood Community College, and right off the bat, I got a couple offers to work on some documentaries, and it just kind of blossomed from there. I was going to television and digital film school, and really put me in the right path to be a documentary filmmaker. I always liked the stories, but we didn't really necessarily have our own documentaries out. It was always these documentaries that were made about our people, and I was like, man, it would be really interesting to have one of us, actually tell the story, or actually tell a different version of it. And it wasn't a political move. It was just something like that I saw creatively. I was like, I think I can tell this story different with the same elements. So yeah, I've been doing that for about 10 years now. I graduated in 2007 or 2008. And just been grinding away. I've worked with the Kalispel tribe for their first year as a language school, or the language nest that they have now that is, blossoming and really, really doing some great work. Yeah, I've done different language documentaries for the Salish School of Spokane, who's also teaches the Salish language, and just some other cool stuff. Did a live video in LA at the Viper Room for this Navajo singer called Black Kiss. His name's Pete Sands. It was the first time a Native American act headlined the Viper Room. The Viper Room is where Johnny Cash had made his resurgence in the 90s. So it was kind of a really cool thing for me. I'm a big rock and roll fan and, old country fan. And, for me, those are things that were rewarding, is telling a interesting story that a lot of people can connect to. And then, after this particular journey, I'd been putting out short videos, and I got invited to go to Canada and do a similar project where we built a traditional birch bark canoe with these kids that live on this island. This island's about 90 people, and it's called Temagami, or Temagami First Nations. And I was invited out there to just do the same thing, document whatever you can. This was the first time that they were actually going headfirst into building their own canoe with resources from their homeland.
Oh, nice.
So, yeah, it was a crazy experience. So this film was really took me places since then. So I was able to finish that film before this one. I let this one kind of sit with me because I had so much personally in this film. I kind of had to wait to tell it. And then I was able to hook up with Upper Columbia United Tribes, who had actually sponsored the canoe journey project. They saw the work I was putting out, and they wanted to join the project. So they were able to sponsor part of the project and, help me tell part of the story that maybe I wasn't necessarily focusing on, which was the history. At the time I was really trying to tell the experience. But yeah, it's kind of wild. It's been a wild year and a half, I can tell you that.
I'll bet. Yeah. So where are you going from here? I mean, do you have any direction that you have in mind for future films? Or?
Yeah, this one's kind of taken me by surprise. Early on, there was early cuts that Sherman Alexie had seen, and he offered some notes. I don't know him personally, but, it just so happened that he saw it, and I was able to get him to read, a passage from one of his books, and also this poem, Pow at the End of the World. So, there's things like that, I guess victories or I guess, success or fame, I see things like that. Like I've been able to work with Chris Ayer, who directed Smoke Signals, won the Audience Award, work with Sherman Alexie, get to use the music of Jim Boyd. You know, there's things like that. I have a checklist, and I'm kind of getting towards the end of what I expected out of the documentaries. Now that this one has been so close to me, I don't know if I have something that'll interest me quite as much. So I'm going to start working in more narrative films. I feel like I need to write more, which is what I wanted to do when I got into film, was tell narrative stories or tell, you know, more personal stories. So I think that's kind of my path at the moment. I'm not saying I'm not going to do a documentary ever again, but this one was so good. I'd be okay if this was my last one. It's reached so many people. It's like in 15 or 16 film festivals. I recently just won the Native American Doc Challenge from the Audience Awards.
Oh, congratulations.
It was pretty wild. But to be on the stage with those people, I think I've, you know, a lot of people I've followed for a very long time that are roughly the same age or younger than me. And I'm like, man, this is exactly where I wanted to be. Now I just got to I don't want to say a new path. I just feel like I have to pivot after this. But yeah, I think it's all good though. Like this film will live on with other people. UCUT is showing at different communities. I'm doing special engagement communities like this and film festivals and really spreading the word about the people of the Columbia. But ultimately, I'd like them to take control of the film and, you know, put it in museums, put it in the hands of people that don't quite understand what's happened in the Upper Columbia. Yeah, I think this is a good footnote for me.
Right, yeah. Well, Derrick, is there anything that we might have missed or that you want to add before we wrap it up?
Oh, I think we pretty much covered everything. I would just say have interest in, you know, these kind of stories. And I always felt like there was a lot of guilt in some of these documentaries, or not necessarily on purpose, but a lot of people watch these and feel bad or feel responsible for some of the things that have happened. But I want people to see that there is reconciliation, there is healing, there are new things that we're doing. It's not depressing to be a Native American. It's actually we're very proud to be from this area, and we're very proud to be, you know, Native Americans in this time. And I would just say, like, hey, if you can pay attention to what we have to say or pay attention to the real history of the area, I think we're all going to be in a pretty good space here soon.
Well said. Yeah. Is there any way that people can support you personally? Do you have any sites or any?
Yeah, I have a website. I'm finally kind of figuring that out. It's always been kind of word of mouth. Like,
right.
How I've been able to make money or actually get films done is kind of crazy, considering I've never really had a business card or anything like that. But I have warponypictures.com. That's where I have some links to the feature films, press releases for this particular film, and it's a good way to contact me. Also, Facebook, Twitter, it's my name, or, you know, Warpony Pictures on Facebook. I'm pretty interactive. I'm always kind of looking for other stories to tell or to screen it. I feel like a lot of people could speak to the history of this film or history of, I guess, this event, but I can tell you how this particular story, this film happened. So if you want that story, we can connect, we can screen the film with you, and then I'll do this Q&A kind of like what we're doing tonight.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, there you go. Yeah. So how do you spell your last name?
My full name is Derrick LaMere. It's Derrick. Last name is LaMere, Lamere.
So this is Byron and
Derrick
saying so long for now and keep it on the route. Yeah.
Awesome.